Good evening and warm welcome to all the participants. We are delighted to welcome you once again for this 117th WiseViews Leadership Conversation. And today we are fortunate to be joined by Mr. Sumant Batra. Mr. Sumant Batra is a great resource and a leader working at the vertex of law as well as policy, very closely with Government of India, and I'm delighted to present his brief bio with you in a short while from now. Welcome, sir. Once again, good evening and welcome to you.
Thank you so much. I'm holding my phone. I can't even fold my hands to reciprocate your greeting. And I wanted to apologize to everybody for having to address from my car, but for unfortunate reasons, I couldn't reach my office in time. So please bear with me.
Absolutely fine, sir. Thank you. Allow me to share my screen. I'll make a brief introduction. These are WiseViews Leadership Conversations, which we hold on Fridays, typically in the Friday evening sessions. And this is the 117th, as I mentioned to you. We have Mr. Sumant Batra. He's going to talk about sound business environment, building safe to fail culture. The intro and the opening remarks will be the first half, followed by 40 minutes of Q&A. We probably cross 40 minutes as well, maybe additional 5 to 10 minutes today. Mr. Sumant Batra is an insolvency lawyer of a global reputation with 3 decades of experience in insolvency and the related laws. His work and contribution ranges from law practice to consultation. As a lawyer, he has been rated amongst the top 30 restructuring lawyers by Global Restructuring Review. Mr. Batra is the president of Insolvency Law Academy. We signed an MOU with Insolvency Law Academy recently with ICFAI Law School at Hyderabad. And I had this opportunity of meeting Sir during that occasion at Hyderabad. He is an Indian Institute of Excellence in Insolvency. It's an Indian Institute of Excellence in Insolvency. He sits on multiple expert committees and working groups in India and other jurisdictions. As a senior international consultant to the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank Group, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the ADB, Asian Development Bank, and other developmental institutions, he has worked in over 15 jurisdictions. He is International Fellow of American College of Bankruptcy and Distinguished Fellow of the Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Government of India. Mr. Sumant holds the distinction of being the youngest president of Insol International. During his term of 10 years on the board of Insol International, he was extensively involved in global benchmarking and standard setting in the field of insolvency. He is a member of advisory board of Asia Business Law Institute, International Insolvency Institute, and many other global and Indian institutions. His book, Corporate Insolvency, Law and Practice, is considered the foremost scholarly work on fundamental principles and approaches to the insolvency system. He has co-authored Making of New India, Transformation under Modi Government, which is co-edited by Dr. Vivek Debroy, Anirban Ganguly, and Kishore Desai. This is wonderful. I am extremely happy once again to welcome you, sir. I will now take one more moment to introduce my esteemed colleague, Professor R. Prasad. He's the director at Academic Wing in ICFAI Group. He brings 3 decades of rich experience as an entrepreneur, as a corporate leader, and now as an academic at ICFAI. He holds BTech from IIT Bombay and PGDM from IIM Kolkata. He published several books, papers, and presented papers in various conferences. Welcome to you, Professor Prasad, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now I request Mr. Sumant Batra to start his session. Over to you, sir. We are eagerly waiting to learn from you. Thank you once again, and please start your session.
Thank you so much for a very generous introduction. I am humbled. It's always a pleasure for me to be able to speak to any audience which is willing to listen to ideas, because what I'm going to share with you today is actually an idea which I am hoping will be an important part of the debate, will be an important part of the policy thought process, which will define the path of India in its journey to becoming the developed country in the next 20 years. And this particular topic that I'm going to be talking about is something which is, in my modest, humble view, nothing short of a representation of the voice of the young India or the young of India, the aspirations of the youth of the country. And therefore, please do pardon me if I get carried away while speaking, because I do feel very passionate about this topic. We all have, over the last 2-3 days, celebrated the success of our moon mission, Chandrayaan-3. And if you have heard carefully the speeches of the current head of the ISRO, as well as the head of the ISRO in the past, who was at the helm of the affair when Chandrayaan-2 happened, they have actually attributed the success of this project, Chandrayaan-3, to the learnings from the failure of Chandrayaan-2. Unequivocally, categorically. They have said that it is the learnings from an unsuccessful mission that they have actually created a successful project, which we all as Indians are very proud of, sitting anywhere in the world. A very, very important message that has come out from the attribution of the learnings from the failure is that failure is a very important part of the journey towards success. And this is not really something which is limited to or confined to. I was passing through, I think, a sensitive area, so my voice dropped. So what I was making was the point that I was making was that a country that aspires to create wealth, economic prosperity for its citizens, seeks to create a free market economy where it is the citizens of the country that jobs. It is not the responsibility of the state to do that. State only facilitates, state only creates and enables a suitable business environment, economic conditions, legal infrastructure, where all those who aspire to become entrepreneurs, do business, carry out commercial activities, financial transactions, trading activities, are able to do this without fear of failure. I'll pause here for a moment and take you back in history so as to substantiate where my confidence of speaking with this conviction on this particular philosophy comes from. And I do not speak this more merely as an insolvency, an expert, a title that is given to me very fondly by the market. I say this on the basis of the histories of those countries, nations that are where they are today as successful nations with sophisticated economies. Let's take the example of US. When the United Nations got its independence, its leaders, its future leaders, all of them were confronted with one major question: what kind of nation, what kind of economy, what kind of social system do they want for the country and its citizens? One of the most important aspects was that it was a young nation, newly born, in fact, and therefore they had no baggage in the past. And they wanted to choose for itself a system that would propel them as one of the foremost nations in the world, starting from the scratch. And a conscious choice that they made after much debate and consultation was that we want to create a nation which has a free market economy, like freedom in its other thought processes, which in other words meant that the state would not really take on the responsibility to create wealth. State will only be a watchdog, state would only be a facilitator, and it would create an ecosystem where it is the individuals who create wealth. And how does that happen? That is where, in fact, their biggest contribution to this philosophy comes from. Because they recognized that even a young mind, and which is what Mr. Ratan Tata's speech, if you see on the YouTube, you will find by saying that it is not just a person with an experience, but even a young boy, young girl who could actually come up with an idea, a very valuable idea, an idea which that young believes shape into an innovation. And of course, behind that idea, or even before that idea, is a dream, an idea and a dream which together makes that person believes that if this idea, this dream is supported, this could actually become an innovation. And they believe that we need to create an environment where people invest in these young people's dreams and ideas by funding it as venture capitalists or even as lenders. And when these ideas are funded, they shape into innovation. And innovations lead to intellectual property. Intellectual properties are worth millions and billions of dollars because based on that, technologies are created. Based on that, industries are created. Based on that, entrepreneurial activities are created, which in turn create jobs, which create wealth. And that became the national philosophy of that country. And as a part of that philosophy, they also recognize that these young people, or maybe not even as young people, when they would take their ideas forward, they may succeed, they may fail. But if they do fail, we will ensure that they are not stigmatized or penalized or ridiculed for the failure. And we'll accept their failure as gracefully as their success. And we would be willing to give them a dignified exit from that failure so that they can restart with another idea. And that gave birth to the whole concept of second chance. A second chance is what a bankruptcy law is all about. To provide a dignified exit and a second chance to recommence your life without fear and consequence of failure haunting you. In other words, recognize into your national philosophy that it is safe to fail. Don't be afraid of taking risks. It is safe to fail. And also in that process, at the same point of time, build safeguards to ensure that this particular freedom and of the ability to accept failure at all levels is not abused. And those who do actually make misuse of this by indulging in malfeasance and other kind of activities, they should be penalized. And that is how US today is called as the country of dreamers. Until about 25, 30 years back, every young man, woman, and girl wanted to be in US because US is expected to give wings to your dreams. This is how the whole concept of wings to dreams was shaped into that US philosophy, making it as one of the most powerful country in the world, where the largest numbers of intellectual properties are made and registered and held. Even Indians, Chinese, Go to US, because their ideas are funded, you get intellectual property, you get venture capital, you get private equity. People invest in your dreams, people invest in your ideas. You go and talk and tell somebody about your presentation that this is the idea that I have, people will believe in it. If they believe in it, they will fund it. Now, just stepping back into India, because I know that I have 20 minutes, and I'm just going to take only 5 more minutes to contextualize it with India. Look at India. I mean, the introduction of this talk that was circulated very kindly, very clearly mentions what the average age of the Indian population is, and how we are today the youngest nation in the world, not in terms of the age of our independence, India, but the young population of the country. Now, these young people, till about 30, 40 years ago, were deeply influenced as living in joint families by the grandparents and parents who used to, out of their experience, guide them and say, go to a government job, be a doctor, be a lawyer, be a nurse, be a teacher, be an engineer. Not anymore. If you see these young people today, their aspirations are very different. They are just giving vent to their dreams. They want to follow and chase their dreams. It could be someone wanting to open a cafe, someone opening a boutique hotel, someone opening a tattoo studio, someone opening a rock band. They want to just experiment with their lives. And what they need to be able to do that is sound policy, sound business environment, ease of doing business, ease of exiting business, and to be able to take risks, to be able to try their ideas, and in the event they succeed, make wealth, not only for themselves, but for the economy, for the country, for people around them. But if they fail, just brace up, kick the dirt off your clothes, shake the dirt off your clothes, and start again without being ridiculed, without being pulled down, without you being in any manner stigmatized as someone who has failed. If it will be impossible for any government to be able to provide jobs to these young people. No government has that kind of jobs available. No private sector has that kind of jobs available. And we have to, as a nation, move to from job seekers to job creators. And if we have to move to job creators, we need to provide sound business environment for entrepreneurship. And in that environment, the backbone would be the ability to take risk and feel confident while venturing out and experimenting with an idea, and accept not just yourself, but as a community, as a society, as a nation, failure in the event the idea doesn't work as something which was legitimate, something which we need not in any manner let ourselves down or our spirits down. We have to allow these young Indians that space, that ecosystem, that environment in the overall 3 elements: ease of doing business, ease of continuing to do business, and ease of exiting the business. In all the 3 components of the spectrum of the life of a business, without fear of failure at any stage, either at starting or at continuing or at exiting. That is where our hopes lie, and that is where we believe eventually the mantra of the success of this country will lie going forward. And that would require a tremendous amount of change in the mindset, cultural shift at all levels, at the levels of the policymakers, both in the parliament and outside of that, where the voice of the young, the suggestions of the young should be taken into account while formulating the policies. The bankers, the lenders have to change their mindset that every failure is not malfeasance. Every failure is not malafide. People do fail when they take risks, but accept that and give a person a chance, because at the end of the day, these are the only people who will eventually create wealth for this country. And of course, as a society as well, learn to accept that failure not just in business, but failure in every aspect of any aspect of life. You have to treat a person with dignity. Human dignity has to be foremost. And you have to understand that what a person at that point in time need is support of all kinds, moral, human, social, even medical, in terms of counseling, to make sure that that person doesn't go out of the system, doesn't go depressed, is not confined to the fringes, stays in the mainstream, bounces back. And like many US entrepreneurs, including Donald Trump, who filed bankruptcy thrice and went on to become the president of US. The Richard Brosnan, the owner of the Virgin Atlantic Airlines, has been bankrupt twice, but runs one of the most successful airlines in the world. Failure is not bad. Failure is as legitimate as success. Failure is another side of the same coin. And that, I believe, once it gets entrenched in our philosophy in the next 5-10 years, and it shapes how the changes in the policy and the laws are done, and gradual shift in the mindsets of the people, I am very hopeful that we will see India as a very different India run by the young of the country. And the last comment that I have is that, because I didn't really want to really make it as an insolvency topic, I didn't really mention it in the past in my earlier comments, but I have to say that insolvency law, of course, is one of the most important components of this whole safe to fail philosophy, because that is the law which facilitates a dignified exit while balancing the interest of all stakeholders and offer a second chance to the person who has failed without in any manner stigmatizing him forever. Unlike how it happens in the country today, where once you've been a bankrupt, you can't contest elections, you can't take a job, you can't take a loan, you can't travel out of the country. Every statute has a disqualification, a legal disqualification. Have you been declared bankrupt ever? And if you're bankrupt, you're untouchable. We need to change that. We need to completely provide a brand new ecosystem for the youth of this country, the future of this country. I'll pause here, and we'll be happy to take any question, any comment that might be there.
Great, sir. Great. Thank you very much. It's a wonderful overview of the power of the idea that you're mooting on our journey to make India the developed nation, and seeking example from the historical context in which another country has done that by enabling, encouraging the youth and collectively creating wealth without overtly being dependent on the state as a responsibility. We need to learn from that example and march towards creating wealth by encouraging our own youth in India, given the fact that we have a large number of youngsters under the age 29. And that is the biggest strength that we have. The most fascinating thing that you mentioned is about the changing landscape of aspiration within India, not just the demographics. It begins with demographics, but the delightful factor is the changing aspiration compared to last 3 or 4 decades, where people were to go by the guidance of their parents and relatives. But today, they're actually going by the zeal to experiment, they're willing to try new careers, and therefore getting into unorthodox, non-traditional business ventures, small and big. And that is going to give us a lot of hope. Hopefully, there will be a matching environment that is created by the government in terms of policy, in terms of systems, and we have seniors in the industry who come forward to fund those brilliant ideas and convert them into innovative IPable kind of innovative ideas, so that we march towards creating wealth collectively. I think this is a very, very interesting idea, and an idea whose time has come now for India. And as you have given a timeline or a horizon of the next 5 to 10 years, we should be starting to realize how it is fructifying for all of us. Already there are signals, and perhaps there could never be a better time than this. So with this optimism and hope, we would like to get into the question and answer sessions. I'll now invite Professor Prasad to come in. We'll have two clusters of questions. Your office looks great. We'll have two clusters of questions, and the first cluster will be taken up by Professor Prasad, and I'll come back for second cluster. I want to make a mention here that we are joined by distinguished leaders from industry, from various segments like technology, education. We are joined by one Air Marshal Hari Kumar. We are joined by several other leaders from different parts of the country. I welcome all of them once again to this very, very interesting and one of the most powerful conversations we are going to have now. I request Professor Prasad to come in and start cluster number one. Over to you, Professor Prasad, and thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rao. Thank you, sir, for introducing an extremely important topic, and that too in the background of the Chandrayaan success. As I understand it, it looks more like transformation rather than just a transition. And to understand the overview of the subject, you have used the words sound business environment. And of course, you did mention that the critical part of it is the bankruptcy aspect, or the losing out the fear to fail. But if you look at the sound business environment at a macro level, what are the other elements that you would bring in so that we aspire and we work towards moving to that stage?
I'm sorry, I missed your last point. Please, could you repeat it again? I was a bit distracted.
Yeah. The title of the webinar is it's about sound business environment, and of course, you're making the bankruptcy part critical in it. But if you look at the sound business environment, what are the other elements beyond the failure aspect?
So I would say there are multiple, of course, in a country as complex as India. I will name a few as they come to my mind when I speak. I think first and foremost is, of course, that it should be immensely easy for anybody to be able to start a business, set up a business. And that happens through three ways. One, if I want to do it as a company, if I want to do it as an LLP, if I want to do it as a partnership or a proprietorship, I should be able to do this without really being burdened by the procedures, detailed, multiple filings, requirements which the laws would often provide. And we need to reduce the burden and the cost of all those requirements to start a business. The second is we need to, in terms of continuation of business, do two things. One, of course, that the cost of compliances, the cost of regulatory requirements of filings, answering various things, this can be very burdensome and costly. It serves as a deterrent for many people, including for me as well, because I also happen to be an entrepreneur in some way. I and my wife run a boutique hotel in the mountains, in the Himalayas, and there's a small property, but we get so fed up at times in terms of not just the compliances, but people who keep coming to knock at your door. And you know what I mean by that. And this is just so ridiculous. And the young of the India I have seen don't believe in that. Their exposure to the Western world through the internet is so enormous that they find it immensely difficult to deal with these kind of things. And I'll give you my children's example. They're very young, just one of them just gone out of the college, one is just going out of the school. They just have no interest in any of our assets or property. They say, it's so difficult to even maintain a property in India. Sometimes a property tax issue will arise, the tenancy, getting the tenancy evicted, getting a lease deed registered, this stamp duty, that thing is so complex. And when they see us and hear us talk about this, they feel very dissuaded and discouraged. So the ease of all this is of paramount importance to them, because they want to do everything using technology. They believe that even a dispute resolution can happen through use of technology. And they believe that if they have ordered something on Amazon, they just want to pick up a phone and say, oh, you have delivered me a wrong garment or wrong size. This is his and I want to return it. They want it to be as simple as that. They don't want to go to courts. So therefore, the third thing is dispute resolution. They want dispute resolution to be sophisticated, world-class, less expensive, and mature, where people are not able to delay and frustrate other people's claims by sheerly spending years in courts. And last is, in the event where I decide that I'm tired of this business, or I'm bored of this business, or I've failed to do the business because of whatever reason, I should be able to walk out of that with minimal damage by giving all those who deserve a piece of the cake, yes, but not so tired that I don't want to, or exhausted that I'm not able to do anything at all. And I'm probably oversimplifying it because it's much more complex for people who do business. But we need policies, we need regulations, we need laws where people are able to do, incentivized to do business, not dissuaded from going into entrepreneurship activity.
Excellent, sir. I think the 4 dimensions are clear. That which is required to start, that which is required to continue, essentially documentation and costs associated, and then technology, using technology as an enabler in order to make it convenient. And then what happens if one gets into a dispute, and then lastly, the exit. I think summarized excellently. I think the topic is now very clear to all the audience members. So we go to the next question. India is young to the insolvency and bankruptcy code. But if you look at the impact of it on industry or economy during its brief tenure, how does it sound? I mean, how has the starting been?
I would say that it is a game changer. It has already proved to be a game changer in many respects, tangibly and intangibly. And let me just start from the very scratch. I think it is game changer from the perspective as to never ever in the history of this country a law has been implemented as effectively as has been IBC. The kind of political will that has been put behind it, the kind of the governmental might that has been put behind it, the kind of stakeholder engagement that has been done, the kind of ear to the ground that the government has done to make sure that the law, wherever it is failing to implement or meet expectations, it is amended quickly. Wherever the gray areas are addressed immediately. How the judiciary also has stepped in to create world-class jurisprudence in such a short period of time. Where other countries have taken 40 years, 30 years, we have done this in less than 7 years. Now, this is one example as to how the policy making is done and implemented. The second aspect is, yes, in terms of economic behavior, in terms of the behavioral economics, if I may say, it has brought in a paradigm shift into how the borrowers now perceive their responsibility to repay. They are not able to take the system for granted. There is a discipline that the law has brought in. I wouldn't use the word fear. It started as a fear, but I think it is now something which is converted to a discipline because people know that if the company is dragged into insolvency, they will lose control of the company. And therefore they understand. And they also believe now that there is a value to this insolvency process. Actually, you can use it if even, if you pay, you don't need to use it. But if you end up at least going into insolvency, there is a value because these assets which are lying dormant, non-performing, through this process are brought back into the economy and they contribute into the churn of the GDP. The next important aspect is that from a more low-hanging fruit point of view, it has amassed a huge amount of recovery for the banks in a very short period of time. And which means that that capital can be redeployed for lending it again to the other on new entrepreneurs, new ideas. And last is that what it has really done is it has created a new industry, insolvency industry, which has offered opportunities to so many stakeholders, be it your lawyers, valuers, accountants, company secretaries, distressed asset investors, advisors, turnaround professionals, all of them are today flourishing. And in my view, that in this insolvency law is a role model in terms of how laws can be made in a short period of time and even effectively implemented.
Again, sir, I think it's given a wonderful overview about, though we keep hearing about, some parts of it here and there, I think you've given a wonderful overview about how this whole thing can pitchfork what the goal is in terms of a safe business environment, and in turn contribute to the building of mindset and culture. But and I think a lot of it has already been covered.
Yeah. In all fairness, as you did mention, and rightly so, about some of the negativity which exists around IBC, I think I should make that comment as well to be completely objective about this. We do understand that there are delays. There are still delays in terms of how long it often takes in getting the resolution done, and more from the banker's perspective than anything else. Yes, there has been delays, but the fact remains that the IBC, the NCLTs were overwhelmed with so many cases that nobody anticipated. 66 members were originally planned for the National Company Law Tribunal when it was conceived in 2009 and 10, but only for the company law dispute. IBC was not in existence then. When IBC jurisdiction was also given to the Company Law Tribunal, members were not increased. They still continue to be 66 and never have ever been appointed in full strength. That is one of the biggest reasons. And second, of course, is that in initial years, there is always a learning process. There are roadblocks. There are all kind of bumps on the way, which obviously will slow down at times. But I think the most positive aspect of all this is that the political will has remained intact. It has not got shaken. And the government has remained on its toes. It continues to make effort on a daily basis. And I'm not exaggerating because I'm very heavily involved. On a daily basis, they're on their feet, making sure that they get it right. And I think that's what really continues to give confidence to people like us, that even if there is a downside at some point in times, and you don't meet expectations in terms of the result, we will get there sooner than later.
Excellent, sir. I think, this kind of highlights what a new initiative taken in the last few years can actually mean for the country. I think so much of positivity around it has not been understood to the extent. And in the larger frame of reference that you're talking about with respect to aspiration, I think it's indeed extremely important.
And also, if I may just add one more comment to this, is that it has enhanced India's reputation globally. Not just in terms of how policy making is done and implemented, which is an example, but also in terms of how the international investors, the global community of investors, is getting more and more confident about investing in India. Because howsoever excellent and attractive your entry laws may be, if your exit law continues to be gloomy, a wise investor will never invest in an economy from where it cannot exit. It's like going to a cinema hall and knowing that there are no exit doors, and in the event of an accident, mishappening, you will be trapped and you will have to go through the same door, which is the entry door. How do you do that? And that's why you see these exit sign of, neon signs in the cinema hall, because that gives a confidence to the person who's going and sit and watch the movie that in the event something happens, I will be able to, in an orderly manner, exit from all without damage to the property or to the self, to the life.
Extremely important point, sir, given the current situation and the need for those kind of funds to come in the period that you've mentioned. So we move to the next question for the benefit of the audience. Could you, outline what kind of process of resolution is used under the IBC? What are the stages? Who are the key players involved?
Sure. So insolvency process as it exists today, it is called as a creditor in control regime. The reason for that is that the worldwide, the insolvency systems are divided into brackets. One is debtor in control regime and the other is creditor in control. The debtor in possession regime is led by US, which necessarily means that whether it is the creditor who initiates the insolvency process or the debtor continues to remain in the possession of the assets, continue to run the enterprise, and often, depending on which country you may be talking about, also has the first right to present a resolution plan for restructuring of the company. And therefore, it enjoys the benefit of a moratorium, which we call as a standstill period or a thaw period, where when an insolvency petition is filed, no creditor is able to pursue any action. So he can respite, and in that period of respite, a resolution is explored. While in a creditor in control regime, although it varies from one country to the other, but the central theme is the often independent insolvency expert or professional, by whatever name called, is appointed as soon as the insolvency happens, who either replaces the management altogether, like in India, or supervises the management by sitting on the board and being very proactively involved in the business. And he takes instructions from the creditors. So creditors are behind the steering wheel. They derive the decision making. So India chose the creditor in control model in 2016 because we had a debtor in possession law since 1986, which didn't work. And the lenders were very frustrated. Non-performing assets had risen significantly. It was a time bomb ticking, waiting to explode. And therefore, on a very urgent basis, interventions were made and this law was enacted. Now, the scheme of this code is either the debtor or the lender can initiate an insolvency proceeding if there is a default. It is an insolvency law initiation which is based on a default test, not a balance sheet test that your assets are less than your liabilities. It is a default test that if you are defaulted to a creditor can take you to insolvency, or even a debtor himself can move. Once an insolvency petition files, three things happen. If the debt is admitted, the petition is admitted, and it should be more than 1 crore rupees of default. As soon as the petition is admitted, an independent insolvency professional is appointed as an interim resolution professional, who's deemed by fiction of law, is assumed by sheer appointment order itself and by the trigger of the law, takes the shape of the board. The entire board directors are suspended, and he becomes a single member board. All the powers of the board vest in him or her. The third thing that happens is the management is then required and obliged by law to report to the insolvency professional and to nobody else. And of course, the next most important thing that happens is the moratorium order is passed, which means no creditor can take any legal action or continue any legal action if already taken. And even the debtor can't dispose of any asset, can't do anything. The next step is for the interim resolution professional to issue a public announcement to invite claims from all kinds of creditors. Every single kind of creditor, whether you owe 10 rupees to 100,000 rupees, you file claims. When claims are received, he segregates them. And those creditors who are financial creditors mean who have given money to the debtor for time value for money, simply speaking, a loan, for example. He identifies them, and then based on their claim, he constitutes a committee of creditors. So every financial creditor comes on the committee of creditors except those who are related to the debtor. And their voting share is assigned, which is pro rata to their admitted claim. So if it is 1,000 crore, there are 10 financial creditors. Their total claim is 1,000 crore. Each one has, let's say, 100 crore. So they will have 10% voting share each. I made it very simple for explaining, but of course it can be much more complex. Then he informs the NCLT and IBBA that have constituted the committee of creditors. All this is happening in 21 days. And he is then supposed to hold the meeting of the COC in the first 7 days, and 7 days thereafter. And in that meeting, the first agenda is whether that interim resolution professional should be confirmed as the resolution professional or another person should be appointed. Because it's possible that one creditor may have filed a petition, but the body of creditors wants a different person. Or the debtor itself has filed a petition, appointed a person of his own choice, but the creditors don't have a confidence on him or her. They want a person of their choice. Law permits them to appoint a person of their choice. And then that person, and I'm going to be a little rapid fire here, fast forward times, that in resolution professional prepares an information memorandum of the company, which is all liabilities, assets, every single information, relevant information about the company's business. He appoints 2 LOs to determine the liquidation value and the fair value of the enterprise. He then goes to the lender, to the committee of creditors and say, I have to invite resolution plans from the market for the company's resolution. Please tell me what kind of conditions you want to impose, what kind of people you want to be invited. So they will say, okay, fine, 1,000 crore worth for some experience in automobile, if it is an automobile company, parts company. He will then issue a public announcement inviting expressions of interest from people who would be interested in submitting a plan. When these people submit their EOIs, he prepares a list. Once the list is finalized, he takes undertakings from them, confidentiality, and then gives them access to the information memorandum. Mostly it is virtual data. And he asks them to submit a resolution plan. In order for them to submit a resolution plan, he gives them what we call as RFRP, which is a request for resolution plan, which is a document, detailed document which lists the terms and conditions. That you submit a plan, you can't withdraw it, you can only change it once. These are the minimum conditions you should be there, you can't be in a joint venture, or blah, blah, all those terms, which the lenders decide. Once the resolution plans come in, then he examines whether they meet the compliances of the law, both the RFRP and the IBC itself. He places before the committee of creditors all the plans which are compliant of law, they're voting. Committee of creditors negotiates with the resolution applicants, asks them to improve, and then whenever the final plans come in, they then are put for voting by the COC. If the plan is approved by 66% of the voting share of the financial creditors of the members of the COC, it is considered to be approved. Then the approved resolution plan is filed by the resolution professional before the NCLT for approval. NCLT hears any objection that might be against the plan, and after hearing passes an order approving the plan. If the plan is approved, it becomes binding on everybody on this earth. If it is rejected, they can, in certain circumstances, ask that try the process again or order liquidation. If the liquidation is ordered, then a liquidator is appointed, and that liquidator then sells the assets of the company. An effort must be made, of course, to sell the enterprise as a going concern if possible. But if that is not possible, then piecemeal assets or slump sale. And then the proceeds are distributed. Now, distribution either in resolution plan or in liquidation is done in accordance with the waterfall that is defined in the law, which is that costs will be paid first, secured financial creditors will be paid after that, workmen 12 months, employees, workmen 20 months unpaid salary, employees 12 months salary will rank pari passu with the financial creditors. Unsecured creditors after that, government dues after that. So there is a kind of a ladder which exists, and you have to pay in accordance with that. One other aspect which I wanted to mention which is very critical also, is that simultaneously when all this is happening, the resolution professional is supposed to investigate the affairs of the company. And if he finds that certain transactions questionable have taken place, we call them as avoidance transaction. In the look-back period is 1 year, but 2 years in case of related party transactions, to identify if preference has been given in payment to any party over and above those who would have legitimately got the payment first, or undervalued transactions have been done, or fraudulent and wrongful trading has been done. Then he can file an application for clawback all the money that has been taken out, or clawback of the assets that have been taken, which is what we call as avoidance transactions. So this is essentially very broadly stating the scheme of the IBC, and we have seen huge amount of steel sector companies, SR, and even Monet Ispat. We've seen a large number of other companies, big chip, getting restructured. But of course, real estate is still a big problem because of the complexities that it brings with it. But I hope that answers your question, sir.
Absolutely, sir. I think it's a very quick masterclass on how this whole thing goes through, and I hope all the audience members and those who watch it later get benefited by it. Now coming back to the way this has evolved, reports say that the cases which are withdrawn and the amounts which are involved in that are far higher or 3.7 times higher than the cases admitted. Now, what is the mechanics or kind of dynamics at play here? What does it portend? What are the lessons we get from this?
Yeah. So if I've understood your question right, you're really talking about the price discovery. Because sometimes the lenders owe, let's say hypothetically 40,000 crores. Debtor owes to lenders 40,000 crore, but ultimately the plan is only for, let's say, 4,000 crore. So which is let's say 1%. Let's say 40,000 crore or 4,000 crore is 10%. Sorry. So 90% is the haircut you're talking about. And what is worrisome in that is that because the liquidation value of the debtors, of the financial creditors' debt is 40,000, but they're getting 10,000. The trade creditors get nothing because they are in the queue, in the waterfall, much below. And therefore, the trade creditors, the operational creditors, and the state government dues are what we may call as the collateral damage in that process. So they consider themselves to be the victim of the IBC in that sense. Now, there are many reasons for lack of optimizing of the value, the price discovery. There are three main reasons, I would say. One, that we in India have not really been able to develop a effective, attractive secondary market for distressed assets. Globally, there's a very well-established, sophisticated market for takers of stressed assets. There are specialized funds, special situation funds we call them, who actually master in taking over stressed assets. They then have the skill set to turn it around very quickly and then exit by making profit. Economy benefits because that asset is turned around and is back into the economy, contributing to the GDP, while the private players have obviously, as an entrepreneurial activity, benefited from it. And of course, that asset will be, again, in a good health, available for fresh security and fresh borrowing. So that is the cycle that happens worldwide. But in India, unfortunately, we do not really have that as sophisticated developed. And one of the reasons for that, two of the reasons, if I may say, although there are multiple, one is that it takes a lot of time in India, in courts or even in IBC, as we were discussing. And therefore, for distressed asset players, that's a deterrent because they believe that brings an uncertainty, the costs go up. So they have planned a resolution plan today at a value of 4,000 crore rupees. But by the time it is approved in 1.5 years, the value of that has dipped further. So it is a loss to them. And the second reason also is the repatriation, because repatriation laws are very complex in India, how to take money out of the country. And that also is a bit of a deterrent for at least the foreign funds. Having said that, asset reconstruction companies and many funds are looking at India, some sitting on the fence, some have taken a plunge, and there is a lot of activity happening, but a lot more needs to be done. The second is the litigation funding. Worldwide, at least in sophisticated economies, litigation funding is a big thing, which means that if a financial creditor has a loan of 100 crores, he doesn't need to wait for the resolution plan process to be over. He will say, I will at the end of the day, which is my estimate is I'll get 40 crores. So I am willing to sell this today at 30 crores. Because down the line, if I get 40 also, if the value of that will be less than that of 30 crores. Because if I deploy the 30 crore in the market today, I'll be able to recover more than 40 crores in 1 year. So a wise creditor will want that. But in order for somebody to buy it at 30 crore, you need litigation funders, because they are the ones who specialize in this. They will say, okay, fine, doesn't matter. I'll buy 40 crore today. I will just make money out of that. Maybe I'll expedite, I'll bring in best of the lawyers and expedite the process. So that is litigation funding, which is missing in India, but we are focusing on that. And the third part is the interim finance, which is called as post-commencement funding, which is called as super priority funding, last mile funding, we call it also, which is that when the company is going into insolvency or likely to go into insolvency, that's when you need to preserve the value of the asset significantly. You need to take a lot of steps to be able to make sure that the asset value doesn't deteriorate in pre-insolvency period and in the insolvency period. And for that, you need sometimes funding, which you can lay. And that funding globally, even in India, is paid as a cost of insolvency process, repaid, and has super priority. But not many banks are excited about spending good money after bad money. And that is why that is not grown. So these are the three reasons as a result of which there is not enough competitive market for resolution plan. We still are promoter-driven enterprise in India. We are very less financial creditors, financial investors-driven company. Is promoters hold strategic investment. We don't have much investors in India. And as that market will grow, things will grow better.
Excellent, sir. Just a minor supplementary to that. You did mention in the beginning about the creditors suffering. So how is that getting resolved in the interim?
So I have to confess that the creditors are a bit disillusioned. It sort of started very well, but because after the COVID, I think slowed down a little bit, and they do feel a bit frustrated. Their frustration is not as much from the lack of the amount of recovery. I think that they understand in real time that even if they were to recover, they would not really get more than what they are getting at the moment. What they want is speed. What they want is that whatever they're getting, they should be able to get it very quickly. So lack of speed is something which is worrying them more than anything else. And they're actually quite frustrated with the fact that the admission of the petition of insolvency actually takes longer than what it should. Loss is 14 days, but often it can take 6 months. I think these are the two big time frustrations for them. What they are not able to articulate, though, which I think if I make an attempt to do it on their behalf, is that what has really happened is that over the last 6-7 years, one of the risks which we can see as something which is blowing up as something which significantly in proportion is that insolvency is becoming like an adversarial proceeding. Insolvency is not meant to be an adversarial. It's by sheer nature and its fabric a resolution, which means that you resolve issues. You don't litigate on them. You don't go to courts on every single thing. But it's being something which is a national culture. You know, we do believe in litigating, even though we know that it takes a lot of time in court. And that, I think, is a mindset we need to change. You know, we need to resolve, we need to build a culture of mediation where people can actually sit and have confidence in conversation, negotiation, believe in a third-party intervention, rather than go to court and make it very expensive.
Excellent, sir. Again, I think the vast landscape that you have portrayed also shows a lot of opportunity of what can be done, what people can do about it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Excellent, sir. I think last question in this cluster is about this resolution versus liquidation. In the practice in the last few years, what are the lessons learned? What can be done?
Now, that's a very tricky area. So, and I'm going to take 2-3 minutes on this because I just actually spoke about this topic at large to the State Bank of India senior stress asset, fund, stress asset managers from all over the country. You see, if you see the principle of insolvency, what it does is it gives the freedom to the creditors to decide whether to maximize the value of the assets, which is the centric philosophy of insolvency law, by resolution or by liquidation. Because they are the best judge to decide, or they are in the best position to decide whether a resolution would really help or not. I mean, because they have a historical relationship with the company, and they know that they have made every possible attempt. Technology is, outdated, obsolete. They know that even if the management changes, nothing can be changed because of various factors, and they may therefore decide, no point in resolution, let's liquidate. But in certain cases, they would want the resolution because they know that's where the recovery would be better for them in the midterm. Then they don't have a short-term view on this. But the point I'm making is that it's actually the lender's call. And that is how it is articulated in the IBC as well. That at any point in time during the process, they can pass a resolution for liquidation. But in Swiss Ribbon, the Supreme Court interpreted the IBC objectives to mean that liquidation is the last resort. Corporate death should be prevented at any cost, explore resolution, and only if inevitable, order liquidation. That actually built a culture where even culture of kicking the can down the lane, as we call it, where even we know that the company in 1 year from now is going to be in liquidation, we still keep delaying the inevitable. And delaying the inevitable means loss in further value. Today, there's a value of 100 crore to an asset. By 1 year later, that is reduced to 30 crores. Just because you're trying on something which you know very visibly is not going to succeed. So a realization is seeping back in because I was the lone dissenting voice on this who has continued to speak about it, because liquidation doesn't really mean death. It may be the death of the company, but the asset will still go back into the economy in a different shape and different hands. The real estate that will be freed up will be used for another entrepreneurial activity. A plant and machinery may be sold. For example, if it is a plant which is being liquidated, which used to make ceramic tiles, which were in vogue 30 years ago, small white tiles of 6x4. For there's no market for which today, because China's in the Indian market is flooded with top-end tiles. But somewhere in South, somewhere in lesser West or Middle Africa, that may still be an attractive plant and machinery. So if you sell it, somebody from Africa may buy it and give you a value for that. And the real estate is freed up, on which some other entrepreneurial activity which can produce jobs, serve the economy can come in. So liquidation is not necessarily something which is zero value. It is one of the means to recover. That, of course, is an intelligent assessment to be made in each case. So sorry for the rather longish answer, but I thought that I should explain it to that extent.
Extremely important, sir. Extremely important. A lot of these things are not well understood, as you were referring to your session with the SBI, even for people who are experts in it. Thank you very much for all the questions and answers. I hand it back to Professor Rao.
Thank you very much, Professor Prasad. Thank you, sir. I think that's a very detailed account of the flowchart of the IBC process, the process of resolution itself. And although it has taken some time, it is extremely important for us to understand that it has been posted in the minds of the listeners who are around the screen today, which otherwise is actually difficult to fathom. And given the fact that the law is young and the processes are doubtful, an authority like you coming on the screen and sharing with us makes a great deal of sense to us. Thank you so much. We appreciate your patience on that. Sir, I'll now request you to respond to a few questions in the cluster number 2. I'll reduce the number of questions given the paucity of time. But invariably, I've expected this, depending on the topic, we've always crossed the deadline and the times that we have promised. I would now request the audience to raise their hands. We will be able to connect you to the speaker directly. Before that, I will probably take 1 or 2 questions, which I have a list of questions to go by. Please raise your hand and we'll be able to connect you. Open the mic. So the first question that I would like to take is more about what are the tangible or measurable outcomes that businesses can expect to achieve by embracing a safe to failure culture. Maybe 2 or 3 tangible outcomes that one can count on by ushering in this safe to fail culture as part of our businesses.
I think first and foremost is that you're able to provide a very organized treatment of the assets that you are leaving behind when you're exiting, because safe to fail essentially means that you have recognized that this particular entrepreneurial activity or whatever venture that was undertaken has not really worked. But the fact remains that there will be certain intellectual property in that, there could be certain assets in that, there could be certain liabilities on that. And what you're really wanting to do is through the use of the law, create a dignified exit where you are then able to step out without any strings attached and start on a clean slate. So clean slate is not an intangible, it's a tangible, very valuable outcome of the safe to fail drop set. Because what it really does is that it then leaves you with the opportunity to start something afresh by reassembling your energy. The second tangible outcome is that it helps you to sustain and even retain your business relationships, because everybody is being satisfied by virtue of a legal mechanism for which nobody can hold you responsible for having paid less or more, because that is how the law is going to provide as an exit. And therefore, you are able to preserve your relationships, your goodwill to the extent possible. And you're not then hounded by people for extracting a flesh of your, or the pound. And that, in fact, is another tangible outcome. The third tangible outcome also, although one may say that it may be debatable that it is tangible or not, is, in my view, it is in fact very, very important that no nation can prosper if its citizenry is not healthy. A social fabric of any country which is unstable, comprises of unhappy citizens, can never create a wealthy and prosperous nation. And therefore, what in my view a safe to fail law also does is it helps in keeping the people of the country healthy. Because if you are being ridiculed, if you're being stigmatized, if you are being traumatized for having failed, and people are going after you from starting from pasting notices outside your house, by stigmatizing in your society, to coming and by use of force taking assets, your possession of your assets, and all those factors, it is bound to affect your health. And that is why debt counseling and health counseling is a very important part of sophisticated economy. You are supposed to, in fact, consult even before filing insolvency a health expert, because your health will affect your immediate family, your community, because you will take it out on your family, your wife, your children, and therefore it'll have a kind of a trickle effect. It will have a ripple effect, and that is why it is so important in my view. Therefore, I've listed these three, one more of an emotional one, and the other two as more business ones.
Fantastic, sir. I think it's summed up very well in terms of the tangible outcomes that one can bank on by resorting to this law, which is going to help us replow the distressed assets and also uphold the social stability or the mental stability and the health part of the society, which is extremely important, which otherwise is traumatized, which otherwise is ridiculed and stigmatized in the absence of one. So thank you so much, sir. I'll request Pratik to raise his question. Yeah, over to you, Pratik.
Very good evening, sir. I would like to thank you for sharing with us your wisdom and insights, which are both enlightening and thought-provoking. So, sir, my question is that I believe that failure is a stepping stone to success, and you learn from the mistakes which you have made, and which also help you to do better things in your life after you experience failure. So I would like to know your take on how to maintain your motivation and enthusiasm after experiencing failures.
Oh, I mean, that's a bit of a difficult question for me to argue, because I don't think I'm an expert who can actually deal with that part of the question. But that I'll make an attempt. You see, motivation comes in largely from 2-3 factors. Even when you're going through a low period, the first and foremost is the hope. Motivation comes from the hope that you still see in the darkness around you at a light at the end of the tunnel. As long as that light is visible at the end of the tunnel, you know that if you make an effort and walk despite all odds, you will reach the end of the tunnel and you will see the light as bright as day, which means that you'll put the darkness behind. And hope is not an abstract thing. Hope is something which is created through policy, through environment that is created, which is what gives you hope. Your hope is not just a dialogue which somebody speaks to you in so many words. It is an ecosystem which gives you the hope. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, of course, the confidence that despite your failure, you would be able to discharge your responsibilities to your immediate family, provide for the education of your children, provide for the medical needs of your mother, so much so even your pet dog. And therefore, the law has to facilitate that when you're exiting, enough is left for you to be able to take care of your needs, and also at the same point in time, walk with your head held high, even if not as a head held high, but at least not in shame. And the third thing, of course, also is, I would like to believe, where you have access to the best of the advice, best of the consultancy at a cost-effective way, where if you need to consult an expert, you are not discouraged by the fact that it would be too expensive for you to be able to afford. So I could think of these three, although I'm not an expert, I have to say this, but I just randomly thought as these were my responses.
Thank you so much, sir.
Excellent, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much for that response. I'll take the next one. With respect to the experience so far, what has been the order of the amount realized by the creditors under these resolution plans? Or what has been the gap between realization against expectations?
Well, the gap has been quite wide, I must say, to answer the second part of the question first. In fact, there is a parliamentary committee report, the standing committee report. Mr. Jayant Sinha, former finance minister's report is there. It's about 2 years old, though, where he has expressed concern on behalf of the parliament on the inadequacy of the amounts that are being recovered. And according to them, the lenders need to do more to be able to recover. So yes, there is a mismatch, if I may say, and that gap is quite wide in terms of what one ought to recover and what is able to recover. But frankly speaking, I must say that even though that gap appears to be visibly in terms of monetary terms wide, but in terms of real time, it is not that bad. It could be better, of course. Who won't really want to recover more? But the fact remains that in reality, if you were to enforce your contracts and go to the court to recover that money, it's not easy. It takes a lot of time. It is expensive, lawyers, costs, everything. So lenders take a more realistic and pragmatic approach to this. And that's why they need to accept less. But eventually, if they recover it through the court process also, will not be significantly higher. And the time value cost is just more significant. So they're just trying to sort of maximize the time value of money. The first question is something which I won't really remember the figures, but if you go to the IBBI website and you dig out their last newsletter, which should be of the we're in August, July quarter, June. Because the next one will come out in September. If you see the last newsletter of quarter, you will get every single of amount recovered and sector-wise also, or you will find the recovery. I'm sorry, I don't remember those figures offhand.
Absolutely. Fine. Thank you, sir. There is one more way of looking at the whole issue. The ease of doing business, ease to do business in a continuous manner, and the ease of exiting the business, which you mentioned. This is part of the environment or a sound environment that we create. One of the laws has actually come in handy to give that confidence and make it safe to fail. Now, when we pivot it, what are the top 5 lessons that we can learn or we can enlist for the benefit of the startups to ensure operational excellence and we don't get into this kind of situation at all? What are the top 5 things that we as startups can bear in mind so that we work on operational excellence and we do not move towards this? Of course, failure could be because of various other extraneous reasons also, but if we have to go by top 5, in your experience, what would be that, sir?
Okay. So I First and foremost is that while one would endorse and validate the view that you have to give wings to your dreams and therefore it is fair to take risks, but every risk should be assessed. So every venture that you take out as a startup, there has to be a deep analysis, risk assessment, and every possible step that you could take to mitigate that risk should be taken. So it's not just an idea alone that works at the end of the day. The real world realities have to be taken into account and factored. The second and the most important aspect is the governance, including the financial governance. Whether it is a small business or the big business, it is very, very important that the culture of best practices, good governance is incorporated into the system, because that brings in the kind of discipline into decision-making processes, to their implementation and transparency, which will help. Sometimes it can be seen to be or perceived to be costly in smaller businesses, but there is a value to that. And I explained, I was just giving you the example of the hotel that we run. We started as a 7-room property. Today it may be 18, 19-room property. But even for that 7-room property, we spent so much of effort putting together standard operating procedures, the code of conduct, every single thing, the leave policy, the tip policy. Nothing was left to the whims of an individual. Everything was thought together as an institutional policy. And all that is paying today because the hotel is running as on autopilot, because everything is policy, not that they have to call. So don't centralize it to individual is my third point. Institutionalize the knowledge. Even in smaller businesses, the problem that happens is that the individual holds on the intellectual property of the entire business to himself. When I talk of the intellectual property, I'm not talking about the trademark or the patent. I'm talking about the knowledge, the know-how. That you should institutionalize it and not make it dependent, because otherwise what happens is, if for some reason that person is distracted or becomes immobile or for some reason has to go out, the institution collapses. So don't make the institution dependent on the individual, institutionalize it. The fourth, I think, is that if you want to grow then and want seed capital, growth capital, you have to bring in complete transparency and sharing of information with your lenders. Have a culture of creating systems for information gathering, information collating, and information dissemination. That's very important, because that's where the visibility to the lenders come in as to how the money is being utilized, and the confidence increases. And that's where the entire trouble starts. If you stop sharing, or you're not transparent, suspicion sets in. Suspicion escalates into something which is then becomes trust deficit. And the fifth point I say is that never be afraid or reluctant to take advice of experts. It always appears to be unnecessary, because somebody sometimes says that who knows my business better than I am, and I therefore don't need any consulting, any advice. I'm not talking only of legal advice, I'm talking of all kind of advice, because I think it's very, very important for any person who's very passionately involved, and especially with startups, that is always the case, to make sure that you always have constant second opinion, objectivity, a neutral opinion, a bounce back, and there is always a value in having expert advice. Never ignore the value of an expert.
These are the fantastic 5 points. I'm sure it is not just relevant to startups, but it is also relevant to organizations of different age that have spent little more time. I think if we focus on these 5 pointers, it will be greatly helpful for us. It's worth repeating the 5. The first one that you mentioned is to assess very critically all the risks that you are taking. Second, have a good system of governance, including financial governance. Third, the know-how has to be, or the process has to be institutionalized instead of being dependent on the individual. so that we can run the organizations independent of people. It cannot be too people-centric or individual-centric. And then the transparency for gathering, seeking, and sharing the information has to be kept in place. And the final one is be open to seek advice from experts. I think that's a very, very pertinent point, especially for startups. Until everything has been blown out of proportions, not many people who are part of the game do not come to know. Whereas at the beginning of a startup, I'm sure several people joined the startup just for sharing the vision of the founder. However, the distress is not shared and not communicated, and it is only communicated towards the end. That is a definite recipe for creating the deficit of trust, and therefore it will go down on a different kind of spiral, which is undesirable. Amazing, sir. I think these points have helped us understand it much, much better in terms of how we need to deal with these things and don't end up using the provisions of the law. However, the benefit of the law is to create an environment and a process that destigmatizes the people who tend to fail. I'm sure a lot of people can fail given the nature of the businesses, given the changing trends, and it could be for varieties of reasons, both internal and external. But if one fails, there is a mechanism and that culture and supported by law, and one can be given a second chance to actually harness the distressed assets and bring it back into our economy. Wonderful session that we have had. I would now once again request if members have any direct questions to ask, we can take. Otherwise, we have hit very close to 8 p.m. and therefore I hesitate to take any questions that we already have. I think most of it is covered, but just in case you have any questions, you may raise your hand. We are about to conclude. We are about to wrap it up. And yeah, on behalf of everyone here, sir, we would like to thank you for your patience and time and expertise that you have lent to this leadership conversation. In spite of being stuck up in a traffic jam, which was unforeseen, you have joined from your mobile phone and stay glued to us and helped us conduct this conversation. Thank you so much on that. On behalf of all the participants, also, I would like to thank you. And I want to also thank Professor Avian Rao, who has made this connect possible with you at Hyderabad. So I want to thank him. And I also want to thank your spouse who spoke a couple of weeks back. And that was a fantastic session on Cinemazi. We wish both of you great success in both these worlds. These are very, very different worlds, of course, in terms of business and in terms of a sound business environment that one is creating, that is yourself, by working so closely with the government. This topic that you have dealt with is extremely different and very, very important for us, given the fact that a large number of our students are going to watch this again. Those students who are working professionals as well and students who are currently on campus are going to go to our archives and look at this. And should we have any additional questions, sir, I will write to you. At your convenience, you can respond to those questions. We would always love to learn from you. And you have given great opportunity for us, once at Hyderabad and now online for our audience who comes from a variety of segments from various domains and technologies and businesses itself. On behalf of Professor Prasad as well, we would like to thank you for this time. We will definitely send a summary of this conversation, sir, for your approval, and then we will post it on our archives. So that's overall.
A pleasure. And I really cherish this kind of opportunity myself. I'm so grateful for having been offered this opportunity. I enjoyed this conversation very much. And I once again apologize for having joined from the phone because of my circumstances. Thank you so much.
No problem at all. So thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your participation and the questions that you keyed in at the time of registration. We would like to invite you once again on the first day of next month, that is September 1st at 6:30 p.m. with a wonderful conversation with yet another great leader. And we will share all the communication and registration links with you. So see you on September 1st. Till then, keep reading more about the insolvency law, the IBC, and the progress that we have made, and where the world has taken roughly about 3 to 4 decades. India has moved that faster in a span of 7 years. So this is extremely important for us to realize our dream of making India a developed nation by creating a safe to fail culture in our businesses and supported ably by the law. We have a lot of experts who can help us in case we are distressed, and that should save us from the stigma that is attached with the failure, both in society as well as in businesses and life. So see you next Friday, and have a good night. And we would love to welcome you again on Friday, September 1st at 6:30 p.m. Thank you.